I hadn't heard of anyone working with doing a musical, which they don't want to call it, but it kind of is working with a pianist on set in like a sound booth, leading the singing.
Okay, weirdly enough, that is pretty much what happened with Les Miserables, because they wanted to get the singing recorded on set. So what they did was the cast of Les Miserables, and I believe that Anne Dudley was involved in this. The cast had earpieces on which the piano was being played off set, so that they could sing and the piano could play with them, and then the orchestration could be done to the piano. So that's the first time I had heard of that. I'm not saying it's the first time it was ever done, but that was the first time I had heard of it. And that was how they solved precisely that problem of you want the vocals to sound like they're happening in situ within the drama. And in fact, there's one sequence in Joker Folie à Deux in which Joaquin Phoenix is on a phone in prison and he sings Ne me quitte pas, if you go away. And it's breathy and it's almost spoken. And actually, it did remind me of Anne Hathaway doing that famous number in Les Miserables, in which she is basically, she's almost talking the early parts of it. So weirdly enough, whether they want to call it a musical or not, it is, and there is a crossover there. So here's the thing. I mean, very good interview. It is a very strange film. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I think I actually mean it as a compliment. If you remember the first one, Scoop the Prize at Venice, Joaquin Phoenix went on to win an Oscar. And the people who didn't like it used words like toxic and cynical and irresponsible. And, the story is this central character who's got this medical condition that turns internal screams into this cackling laughter, and he dreams of becoming a stand-up comic, and he ends up having this, on-air altercation with this character played by Robert De Niro, Murray Franklin. And so basically the previous film was King of Comedy meets The Killing Joke. And if that's the case, then this is the TV movie of Helter Skelter meets Natural Born Umbrellas of Gotham. So as before, you've got Todd Phillips, he of The Hangover, who co-wrote it with Scott Silver. It opens with a Looney Tunes cartoon, which I think is Sylvain Chomet, in which the Joker gets into a fight with his own shadow, and his shadow sort of ties him up. And this isn't just a sort of silly distraction. This is kind of the story of what's happening. It's because there's a part when Arthur Fleck tells a joke, knock knock, who's there? Arthur Fleck, who? And so that's sort of the question that the film raises. So it's a psychological courtroom drama in which action sequences are kind of replaced by these nicely shabby musical numbers, and the destructive urges of the central pair are played out like popular TV show set pieces and Sonny and Cher style duets. So Arthur is in prison for the murders that happened in Joker. He's facing trial and a death sentence if guilty. Lady Gaga is Harleen Lee Quinzel, who is a patient at the Arkham State Hospital who Arthur meets at a therapeutic singing class, which is how we introduce the idea of music as being the kind of key to their relationship. They click, they start singing together, they fall in love, then she gets let out. And she then becomes a kind of squeaky from Manson girl who's sort of like a cheerleader for him outside, leading a band of supporters who see him as this kind of messiah and turn his trial into even more of a circus than it would be with a clown at the middle of it. In the first film, I think the strongest suit, the thing that gave it depth, was definitely Hilda Gudnadottir. And incidentally, there was a lovely moment there when you did Hilda Gudnadottir's name and
He struggled.
And then, because if you remember in the first interview we did, he talked about, it was great working with Hilda Gudnadottir. Anyway,
he's got it slightly better, but you could hear there's a kind of a did I get that right?
But again, I think when the script of Joker, of the original Joker, didn't have depth, then the Hilda Gudnadottir score gave it depth. And this time we have these sung fantasias which evoke the imaginary world that Joker and Harley, in which he's the crown prince of Gotham and she's the queen of chaos. And it's interesting in that interview talking about, they first envisaged it as a nightclub stage show because it sort of does look like that a little bit. The city is falling apart, the world is falling apart, and the singing is falling apart. It is authentically ragged, and it's it's meant to sound live and as if they're in context. There was a thing in your interview when Joaquin Phoenix said, "Emotion first, cracked around the edges, bad notes," and that's fine. That's all exactly what it has, and it really shouldn't work. And at times, it doesn't. But for enough of it, it does, that I ended up being pleasantly surprised. I mean, when I say it's a strange movie, I think it's a movie that may not be what the people that love Joker want from the second film. I don't know. It is a very dark film. And again, Hilda Gudnadottir's music gives it real depth. I think, weirdly enough, it does have the strength of its convictions, and it is much more downbeat than the first film, despite the fact that it has these kind of musical fantasias. When it was interesting when you said, does it lighten the tone? If anything, I think those musical sequences, they darken the tone. They kind of make the dark stuff worse.
That's clear, and that's clearly what Todd Phillips thought. I think he was slightly irritated by the question.
I think he's right. And that thing when he was talking about the corruption of entertainment, well, does that work? I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously the first film had a lot of network in it, and so there's echoes of that here. I have a sneaking suspicion. I mean, I literally watched this film in a state of sort of, God, this is not quite what I thought it was going to be. I have a sneaking suspicion that it might actually be the better of the two films. I don't know that it'll be the more popular of the two films. I haven't seen what the reviews have been like, and I don't know what the response to it has been like so far. But it is very odd. And there's a part of me that is kind of, for all the things that there are sections that don't work, there are sections that feel like grandstanding, there are sections that think this is an entire franchise built on a gesture of Joaquin Phoenix's head thrown back, arms thrown out, leg kicked forward, cigarette smoke in the air. But that's a good gesture. And I think that the oddness and the fact that it is quite as miserable as it is, I mean, it is a miserable film, isn't it? I don't mean that as a criticism, but it is a miserable film.
Yeah, you see, that's where I think the songs actually do lighten it.
Right.
Because I found the first one darker than the second one.
Okay.
And I left thinking, I'm not sure that worked. But then, since then, I've thought, actually, I think it did. So it's sort of grown, I thought about it in the intervening period, and I thought the film has got better the longer I've left it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I found that intriguing. I wasn't a fan of the Steve Coogan bit. I found that annoying and distracting. But I thought his performance, Joaquin Phoenix's performance, and there's a bit of this in the trailer, so people might have seen it, where he's it looks though he's in a cab. He's actually in a prison van. And his face is going through so many different emotions. It's like he's trying out various ideas, various thoughts, and then he's cackling and laughing. I just thought it was extraordinary, which is why I asked him about whether he could sing and cackle at the same time. And obviously he didn't have to do that. But so I think I agree. I think it's the better of the two films.
Yeah. I mean, that scene that you talk about in the prison van when he's trying facial expressions on, and it reminded me of this thing that people keep saying about J.D. Vance, that he looks like somebody trying to figure out what a human being would do in a certain circumstance, and that scene really, really works. This is good. I'm intrigued by this because I'm intrigued that both you and I actually think that for whatever may not work and for whatever may be wrong, that it is actually the superior film, that oddly it's aiming higher. And like I said, I think it has the strength of its convictions. And I think that the first film had very few convictions. So, yeah, what an odd thing. I think we both think it's better.
And a very interesting ending, which we won't talk about.
Yeah.
And so where your attraction is to what's happening in the foreground, but actually the significant thing is happening in the background. So,
yeah.
Interested to know what people make of when they see Joker Folie à Deux,